So here's a really neat piece of homemade equipment I think you guys would get a kick out of. This is an engine run stand, and I wish I could take credit for this, but it's actually the brainstorm and execution of Dallas Brown. That's the guy who does our Wednesday night Tech Talk Lives with us. He owns the AHRA, and he's also one of the promoters for the No Name Nationals. So hashtag No Name Nationals, and you get all the information on that. But this is an engine run stand that he made for himself. Dallas does Buick engines, and he does a couple of them a year. So rather than put the motor together and then drop it in the car and then have to make all of your adjustments and so on and so forth and chase out leaks and whatever happens, instead of dropping it in the car, he fabricated this run stand. And it's pure genius, it's brilliance. And I'll tell you, anybody with a few $100 for material and a weekend's worth of time, basic fabrication skills, could duplicate this or at least build something that's similar. But the features are, well, they're universal, except for the fact that if you're going to mount a Chrysler engine on here, and this is the Junkyard Jet's 360 Magnum, you got to do a little bit of modification, but I'll get to that in a minute. So the stand is completely self-contained. And honestly, if you don't have $50,000, $60,000 to spend on the most basic dyno, this is the next best thing. You're not going to get readings out of it, but you can make all of your adjustments. You can make your carburetor adjustments. You can get your timing set. You can get, obviously, checking for leaks and so on and so forth. It's perfect to break in a camshaft, go through all of those steps without having to be bending over the fender and everything else. And the way this is built, based off of, and I'll show you this in a minute, based off of an engine stand, you could actually do an engine assembly on here. And that's one of the things I like about this. There's so much room, he left so much room around things that you really could do your assembly on this setup. So the basic systems consist of, it's got a part of an engine stand that's permanently welded to it, permanently fixed to it. And you see it's just a square tube box frame. It has a battery permanently mounted. It has a radiator with fans permanently mounted. It's got here, come around this way. We got a fuel cell with a Holly Blue pump and a regulator. And here's your control stand. So on the control stand here, we've got attack, water temperature, oil pressure. Just your basic gauges. And then here's your switches, your crank switch, ignition, and for the fans. So very, very basic stuff. Now, around here, like I said, Dallas does Buicks. And Buicks, like all GM engines, have the starter bolted to the block. Fords and Chryslers have the starter bolted to the transmission. So in order to make this setup work with the 360 Magnum, we had to do a little thinking, and we actually came up with a perfectly suitable deal. All we had to do was use a manual transmission bell housing. And this is just a regular stock, 318, 273, 318, 340, 360 bell housing. We unbolted these lugs to turn them around, and now the bottom bolts that would normally go through the bottom of the engine are attached to the bell housing itself. And then Austin fabricated just these two long, it's just all thread with some spacers, and this holds the engine steady to the perfectly suitable modification to it. And now the starter can plug in here and turn the flywheel, which is already bolted to the engine. Elliot says if you're doing this for, primarily if you do General Motors engines, you don't have to bother any of this, just bolt it right to it and go. Mopar Al came in here yesterday. Austin got the motor all mounted up back here, and then yesterday Mopar Al came in. So these are the extensions that Dallas has, and they're perfectly suited to the relationship on the Buick engine. But for the Chrysler, Al came up with this little setup here. It's just an extension, and it attaches to the block gears here. So it's just, you've got to do your homework on whatever particular type of engine you're going to do, or if you do a lot of different engines, you just put all of the contingencies in, make it as flexible as possible. Other than this mounting that's unique to the GM cars and modified for the Chryslers, everything else he has here is completely universal. So like for instance, your bottom radiator hose, he's just got an extension here. It's long enough and has enough articulations in it that you can make it fit pretty much anything. Same with the upper. So on the upper, he's got the water fill, because obviously you can't fill the radiator down here and expect it to, circulate up to the engine. So when this is in place, all your coolant is poured in here. And again, you've got articulations, so this one, we'll just have to loosen these and turn the hose so that it'll line up with the thermostat housing on the Chrysler. All of the stuff that typically goes to the front of the engine, the coolant temp sensor is attached here, and I don't have the other pieces with it, but Dallas keeps all of the different adapters on this. So regardless of which size you're going to, you can, make it fit. And it's just all self-contained. It's got a catch can, a little water bottle there for overflow, so things don't get too sloppy. Back here, you've got the same thing with the oil pressure thing. We've got all of the different adapters. So regardless of which size your oil fitting is on the engine, you can just screw it in and make it work. And that's pretty much it. He has a set of mufflers here. These things have a General Motors flange on them, so we're going to have to go with the loud style. We won't be able to use the mufflers on here. But that's okay. It's good noise. And that's it. If you're like me, you're a perpetual tinkerer, you're always screwing around with something, or even if you do, let's just say, for example, you do a lot of carburetor work, just to have an engine set up permanently like this and be able to make your basic adjustments and get your jetting and so on and so forth, all of your baseline stuff. Something like this is invaluable. Same thing with the ignition. And again, you're going to do camshaft break-in. We've all run engines on the floor. We've all run engines dangling from the engine hoist. But this is so much nicer. It's just a nice, professional, but simple way to go. And if I was to do anything different than Dallas did, and it's hard to, seriously, the more I look at this, the more I realize how well thought out it is. The only thing I might do differently, perhaps, is to make this part of it detachable, like for instance, so you can have your engine on a stand and then just roll the stand, your assembly stand, onto it and then make your connections from there. If I was to do it, if I was to pick any aspect of this that I would do differently, that's one that I might consider. But if you want to build, all you need is basic fabrication skills. It's a few $100s worth of material and just a very simple, look, he even has it so that these front braces are, you loosen these and you can slide this back and forth. So whatever engine you want to put on this thing, it's going to go. So yeah, nice, cool piece of homemade equipment. And tonight, Austin's going to come. We'll make the rest of the connections on this. I have to weld header flanges because they had to grind through. Those header flanges were a mess, cheap headers, right? So I have to do some welding on the headers, and we'll get them on here tonight. And hopefully before the weekend is over, we can make some noise with this. And of course, you'll see that on video. I can't wait to hear this thing run. So that's it. I hope you got something out of that. I'll see you tomorrow.